How do you eat DNA spaghetti with a replication fork? Hey there, YouTubers. Kitten Hoarder here, and you're watching Session Report. This is the show that takes you to the gamer's table to share in the surprises that come out during play. And today we're going to be playing Pathogenesis, which is a very cool little card game based on biology. It's a deck building game where you play as a pathogen that is trying to basically defeat the human immune system and do damage to the body's cells. And the purpose of this video is going to be to show you a solo variant that I'm working on for the game and explain the variant and then show you a playthrough of it. Now, to be clear, Pathogenesis does have a solo variant in the rules as well as a two-player cooperative variant. But I was not pleased with those rules for a number of reasons. So I designed a variant of my own that's closer to the experience I wanted to have with the game. I'm not saying anything is wrong with the original rules, but it is not the experience I was looking for. This video is going to be in two parts, although I'll probably combine them into one video depending on the length. The first part is going to be an explanation of the general rules of the game, just very, very briefly. Not every single rule, but an overview. And then how my variant works. And then the second video, of course, is going to be, or the second part of the video is going to be the playthrough. So let's get started with explaining how the game works. So, Pathogenesis is a deck building game, which means that you begin with a small deck of very basic cards, like these, and then you use those as some form of resource to purchase new cards to go into your deck that make it stronger over time. Now, this is a very, very common mechanic for a card game. I personally love deck building games. I have enjoyed almost every cooperative or solo deck building game I've played, and this one is no exception. But this is a little different from your standard deck building game. So in most deck building games, you're sort of making your deck stronger is the point. And then some of them add in like attacks that you can do versus enemies, if they're cooperative games especially, or some of the semi-co-ops. But it's generally about getting those resources and getting an engine going so you can get even more of the resources or more of the attacks or whatever. This one's a little different because the starting cards are the majority of the cards that actually have resources on them. The resources are DNA. So you can see these cards have one DNA point, and then they also have another ability. You can play them as either or. You can see that most of the cards here that are purchasable have a DNA cost that's in the lower right corner. Some of these are rotated a little bit. But they have no DNA output, I guess. They have no DNA value, so they can't be used to purchase additional cards. The pathogens can. So, however, you must play the pathogens. If you want to attack the body, you have to play the pathogens out of your hand onto the table in front of you, and from that point, they can no longer be played as a resource. They are as basically an attacker or a monster. If you're thinking of like maybe Magic the Gathering is a pretty good analogy to this. In Magic the Gathering, you have spells, you have lands that provide mana, and you have what are they called? Monsters? I don't remember exactly. But you have the attackers. And these are like the attackers in Magic the Gathering. They just stay in front of you turn after turn, and they can no longer be used to generate resources. So it's a choice that you have to make. And you can see, you can also upgrade your pathogens to even more powerful ones. But again, once you put them out in front of you, until those pathogens get destroyed, they can't be used for resources. So you can actually get yourself into a starvation mode where you are basically stagnant. You have no more DNA in order to upgrade your abilities. And there are certain ways to get around that, or there's certain game mechanisms that prevent that from happening, and we'll explain that in a little bit. So that's the basics of the game. Basically, you are trying to build pathogens in order to destroy or deal damage to the body. Now, you start out with basic pathogens, normal flora, and opportunistic pathogens, but you can get tract-specific pathogens. such as tissue pathogens, respiratory pathogens, or gastrointestinal pathogens that can only attack that certain tract of the body. And you can also get super pathogens, which are a little bit stronger, both in terms of their DNA and their defense, which comes into play when we get through the immune system. You can also get super multi-point of entry pathogens. These are like the highest level pathogens. They could attack any body tract, but they have the stats of a super pathogen. Now these have increasing costs. When you get a new pathogen, you can basically have two choices. You can purchase it directly into your discard pile, and you can purchase any pathogen this way. You can go straight to the super multi-point of entry one. You could go straight to a super tissue pathogen or whatever. Or you can upgrade a pathogen. And if you want to do that, you have to go one step at a time, one level up. So the basic pathogens become these normal tract-specific ones, and then the normal tract-specific ones become one of the super ones. And you can jump straight to the super multi-point of entry from one of the tract-specific pathogens, but you can't jump straight to a super pathogen from a starter pathogen. And when you upgrade a pathogen, you basically trash the one you have, you pay the cost of the new one, and replace it. Replace the one that you had with the new one, and any attachments that you have to that card remain attached to the new pathogen. Now, in terms of attachments, basically, if you notice, every pathogen has these attachment points. And that's another strength of the higher level pathogens. You get more attachment points. And there's two types of attachments that you can attach to your pathogens. You can attach a trait, which is sort of a semi-weak attachment. So this is like alpha hemolysin, which gives you +1 attack, and you get to draw a card when you put it in play, and you have +1 to your hand size as long as it's attached. Or you can also get toxins, and this is a great example, botulism toxin, also known as Botox. And toxins are vertical, you notice, in their orientation, so they require 2 attachment points. So basically, you can't attach a toxin to a starter pathogen, and you can't attach more than 1 toxin to a normal pathogen. It needs to be a super pathogen to have 2 toxins attached. Now, toxins are very, very powerful, but they're also less flexible in a way than having multiple of the trait cards attached. So that is the basics of how attachment points work. Also, every attachment point and every pathogen has a color and a symbol which shows which body tract it belongs to. So the multi-point of entry pathogens and your starter pathogens can attack any body point, any body tract, and they can also have any type of attachment. But you can only use the attachments that are targeting the body tract that you're targeting that round. So you basically have to declare, okay, this round, my pathogen is intestinal. So I can only use intestinal attachments or the purple ones, which are apply to any body tract. So there's a little bit of trickiness with that. But those are the basics of the rules. Oh, and here's another card. There are a couple other types of cards other than traits, and actually there's only one other type of card other than pathogens, traits, and toxins, and those are environment cards. And the environment cards are basically actions that you can play, and they just get played. They either have a lasting effect for the rest of the round, or sometimes they have an immediate effect. Then they go to your discard pile. And one of the most common ones are these ones that let you have a, what is it called? Preemptive attack. And that is once the immune system starts up, you can use the preemptive attack to deal damage before the immune system can attack you. So, and there's one other type of card. These are in your starting deck only. They are new DNA cards. They are used to purchase things, or they are used to trash the card in order to get a special ability. So remove it from your deck permanently, and this is another way you can get yourself starved. But also it makes it so your good pathogens that you built are more likely to recycle back into your deck. So every new DNA card has a trash ability. You build your deck from an assortment of these new DNA cards at the beginning of the game, so there's a little bit of a pre-game deck building as well. And in addition, one other ability on the new DNA cards is you can discard a new DNA card to discard a card from this is called the gene pool, and replace it with a new one if you don't like the selection at all. One other difference from most deck building games is that you are allowed to hold cards in your hand from turn to turn if you don't play them for any abilities. But if you play them for any abilities, they go into your discard pile at the end of your turn. Okay, so now how does the game actually work? What is the goal of the game? Of course, the goal of the game is to do damage to the body. And you do that by playing pathogens. So let's just say that I have this pathogen and I have this trait attached. So this pathogen now deals 3 damage. The red triangles are damage. The blue pentagons, I believe there's it looks like pentagon. Ooh, pentagon. The blue pentagons are defense. So to begin with, you must attack the barriers. Now this is if you know anything about the immune system, I mean this is like high school biology. The first line of defense in the human immune system are the barriers, and these are physical and sometimes chemical barriers to entry. This is a completely passive defense. So, for instance, in the gastrointestinal tract, there's stomach acid. In the respiratory tract, there's ciliated cells. So the cilia sort of push mucus and dead pathogens out of the lungs. In the tissue tract, there's microbiomes. So you have certain, basically good bacteria and stuff in your skin and in your tissues that basically overcrowd and overcompete the pathogens, or outcompete the pathogens. So before you can deal any damage to the body, you have to break through these barriers. And that means attacking the cards in the barrier tract, or in the barrier piles. Each system, each tract has 5 barrier cards. I believe it's 5. So you have to overcome all 5, and then you can start dealing damage directly to the body, and this is also victory points for the end of the game. Once you've broken through one of the barriers and you're ready to deal damage to the body, then the active immune system kicks in. And that's where the game starts fighting back. So, let's just say I have this starting plasmid, this starting pathogen, and I've broken through one of these barriers, and the immune system's going to start attacking. How that works is for every pathogen you have, before you can deal damage, you get an immune system card, and you flip it over, and it's going to do one of various things. Sometimes it'll add a fever to your discard pile, and that just makes it harder for your pathogens to operate, because obviously you're getting these junk cards in your discard pile. It's a very common deck building theme. Sometimes it'll actually just attack your pathogen. Sometimes it'll attach antibodies or other like proteins to your pathogen that will weaken it, or not really weaken it, but make it more vulnerable to other attacks from the immune system. Let's see what this one was. Okay, so this is a neutrophil. This has 4 attack. My pathogen currently has 0 defense, so my pathogen would be destroyed before it could deal damage to the body. And that's why this preemptive attack is so important. If you play a preemptive attack environment card on one of your pathogens, you can deal damage to the body first before you get attacked. If you think you're going to get destroyed this round, it's a good time to use it. So neutrophil also has a special ability. If one of your pathogens has the immunoglobulin G or C3, move there and increase to 8 attack. So not only is this fairly deadly as it is, but if you start getting these antibodies out, and those mostly come from the next immune system deck, which I'll talk about in a second, if you start getting these antibodies out, this can become very deadly. So this first deck of cards is the innate immune system. That's your non-specific immune system response. So these are just things like white blood cells and things like that. But they're not specific to the pathogen that you're fighting. Basically when you set up the game, you also create a discard pile that consists of the wave 2 of the immune response, which is your adaptive immune response. And the adaptive immune response is specifically targeting the pathogens that are present in your body, which means these are the ones that are going to start putting antibodies out and really pump up those starting ones, as well as just, in general, more deadly attacks. Because the science behind it, according to the rule book, by the way, the rule book has some great science details in there. I love it. The science behind this is that the nonspecific immune response, right, the innate immune response, can target. It doesn't really distinguish between your own cells and the pathogens. So it has to limit the deadliness, because if it attacked your own cells with full force deadliness, then your body would destroy itself, which sometimes happens if you're running a very high fever. But the specific immune response can be deadlier because it's definitely not targeting your own body's cells, most of the time at least. So that is the basic rules of pathogenesis. Again, I didn't explain every single rule, but that's the basics of how it's played, so you should be able to understand how my solo variant works now. Okay, so like I said, the game already comes with solo rules. And the solo rules, as they are in the game, basically had 3 rule changes. The first is that when you destroy the barrier card from any of these immune system decks, discard the other 2 barriers. And the reason for that is they don't want you to be able to just basically keep attacking the immune system and getting DNA. By the way, I didn't mention this, but every time you destroy a barrier, you get DNA points equal to the defense of that barrier, and it actually says that on the card. So it's not really something in the rule book, it's just something on all of these barrier cards. So they don't want you to basically just be able to keep attacking these with no splashback, I guess, or no what is it, recompense? I don't know. No response from the immune system, right? I got rid of that in my solo variant. We'll talk about that in a second. Another rule in the official solo rules. At the beginning of each turn, you must trash 1 card, your choice from the center row of the active gene pool, and replace it with the top card of the gene pool deck. This becomes the official solo rules are pretty short, and it is they are 1 body tract specific, meaning you only need to destroy 1 body tract to win in the official solo game. So they have this rule that you're basically getting rid of cards from this gene pool most of the time that benefits you as a player. I got rid of that too. The reason I'm pointing these out is because I want you to specifically be aware of the fact that I'm not using these rules in my solo variant. And then the other sort of rule change, or what's on the back here in terms of setup and game end conditions. There are supposed to be 6 or 5 for a hard game immune response cards per deck. That means 6 innate and 6 adaptive, or 5 innate and 5 adaptive. 60 tokens for each body tract, and the game end condition is defeating 1 body tract, so completely dealing 60 damage to 1 body tract. I've changed some of that. So I changed the amount of cards in here. I kept 60 tokens per tract because my variant is more of a see how much damage you can do across the entire body before the immune system basically destroys you. And obviously the game end condition is changed. There is no real game end condition in my solo variant. Like I said just a second ago, it's deal as much damage as you can before the game ends due to the immune system basically running up to full capacity and destroying the pathogen. So now let me explain the rule changes for my solo variant. So as I specified, ignore all of the official solo rules. You're not going to be using any of those rules in the back of the book that are supposed to apply to a solo game. That means no auto trashing from this deck. Because, like I said, that is a benefit to the player. And also, in my solo variant, you're going to be targeting multiple tracts. So you don't really need to get rid of this. If you really want to get rid of some cards, there are new DNA cards that do that, or you can use their standard discard 1 to discard a card from here, if you really want to cycle through here. One of these new DNA cards, in fact, is basically get rid of all of these cards in the row and completely refill the row. So there's other ways to do that if you need to, but you don't get to do it for free. The immune system deck is 10 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 10 cards in the adaptive immune response as well. There are 60 tokens in each of the body tracts. You also do not get to freely discard barrier cards every time you defeat one. You need to defeat all of the barrier cards, or at least all of the barrier cards for the tracts that you are targeting. Now wait, you might say, doesn't that make it too easy? You can just attack these as much as you want? Well, there is more of a timer. Every round, beginning with the very first round, as long as there is at least one barrier card in play, in every tract, you must discard the top immune system card. So you do need to start doing damage pretty soon. Now, discarding one immune system card is, I guess, a little better than playing 3 on your pathogens, but it's still not like you can just dilly-dally forever. You need to start doing damage to these tracts and these barriers as soon as you can, so that you can start doing damage to the body before the immune system just runs out on its own. So that's the big rule here. Every round, as long as there's at least one barrier card in play in every tract, you have to discard one immune system card at the very end of the round, very last thing you do. You get a sort of a free round when you defeat the last barrier card in one tract, because the immune system doesn't attack you until the next round, but you don't need to discard that card. Let's see, are there any other rules changes? Like I said, there's no free trashing. You will be targeting multiple body tracts because your score is your combined score of all the damage you did across all of the body tracts before the game ends due to the normal game end condition, which is basically the second time this immune system deck gets completely depleted. So the first time it gets depleted, it's just the innate response, then they get all shuffled together, and then the second time, that's 20 more cards, the game is over. So as soon as that deck gets depleted, you add up all of the damage that you did to the body, and you see how well you did. Okay, one last detail for my solo variant, which technically isn't a rules change, but I wanted to point it out because it is very important for this variant. In the rules, it says that for a competitive game, let me see if I can find it. For a competitive game, if you do more damage to a body tract than the tract has damage counters, you may take the additional counters from any other body tract. This certainly does not apply in the solo variant. So part of the challenge is you don't want to just focus heavily on one body tract and deal as much damage as you can, and then work on the other two, because you're going to need to switch gears, because as soon as you deplete, like say the tissue tract, any damage you do to the tissue tract does nothing, and you don't automatically get to kill your pathogens. In fact, I want to specify again that you're not going to use this rule from the cooperative game, which the cooperative game says once the last damage counter is taken from any one body tract, all players may discard any pathogens in play that may only attack that tract. That does not apply here. So you are not using any of the rules in the book that only apply to certain modes of play. You're only going to use those, basically one rule change that I told you about, which, well, basically two rules change. One is sort of the game end condition and victory condition, and the other is that very important rule that at the end of every round, while there's still a barrier in play, you have to discard the top immune card. Clear? Crystal? I sure hope so. So let's just begin playing the game.